the announcement that shook the world. The sun had barely risen over the quiet streets when the world received a notification that no one expected. News outlets flashed the headline in every corner of the globe. Social media platforms were flooded within minutes, and people everywhere paused what they were doing. SundarPichai, the humble, calm, and deeply respected CEO of Google, had stepped down. The silence that followed was not just digital, it was emotional. For many, Sundar was not merely a leader. He was a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and hope. In a simple yet heartfelt message broadcast across the world, Sundar appeared on a live stream wearing his usual modest shirt. His voice was steady, but there was a depth in his eyes that only those who truly listened could feel. He spoke about the years he had spent at Google, the dreams that began when he was just a boy in Chennai, and the people who had shaped the journey. He thanked teams, engineers, janitors, executives, and users. It wasn't the speech of a man defeated, but of someone who had quietly decided to close one chapter before opening another. The audience felt as if the earth itself had shifted. Yet, behind the calm tone of the announcement, there was a current of mystery that no one could ignore. Sundar didn't reveal why he had stepped down so suddenly, neither did he name a successor. But the world's attention quickly turned to one name whispered in tech circles and family corridors alike. Kavya Pichai, Sundar's daughter, who had grown up away from the constant media glare, was suddenly at the center of an unexpected storm. Inside the Google headquarters, emotions were complicated. Teams gathered in cafeterias with steaming mugs of coffee, whispering theories. Some believed Sundar had health concerns. Others speculated about a global move, while a few talked about Kavya's quiet brilliance. She had recently completed her studies with exceptional honors and had surprised many senior engineers with her innovative projects. But taking over Google, one of the most powerful companies in the world, was no small task. As Sundar walked through the familiar hallways one last time as CEO, he paused at places where memories lived. The first lab where Chrome was tested, the room where Android was reshaped, the corner where he had comforted a young engineer who thought she had failed. He greeted every person with the same humility he had always shown. He remembered names, stories, and small moments. His leadership was never built on fear. It was built on respect. And that respect was visible in the eyes of every employee who watched him pass. Later that evening, Sundar returned home to a quiet house. The glow of the setting sun filled the living room with a golden hue. Kavya sat by the window, her laptop open. Lines of code reflecting on her thoughtful face. She looked up when he entered. Her eyes carried a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Papa, why now?" she asked softly. Sundar smiled gently. "Sometimes timing isn't about comfort. It's about truth," he replied, his voice carrying a weight that she could feel but not yet fully understand. Outside, the world speculated endlessly. Investors watched nervously. Tech communities debated. Governments prepared for potential shifts. The board of Google called an emergency meeting that was set for the next morning. The question of leadership loomed large, and though no official word had been released, a single rumor had spread like wildfire. Kavya Pichai had been invited to attend. Meanwhile, Kavya couldn't sleep that night. She wandered through the darkened halls of their home, her mind filled with memories of her father's journey. She had seen him work late nights, balancing challenges that few could imagine. She remembered how he had taught her to stay grounded no matter how loud the world became. She had inherited his sharp mind but also his quiet nature, and now the possibility that the weight of one of the largest companies in the world might fall on her shoulders made her heart race in ways she had never felt before. In another part of the city, a small group of executives gathered in a private conference room. Their conversation was serious and hushed. "She's young," one of them said. "Brilliant, yes. But can she lead at that scale?" another questioned. "Sundar wouldn't step down without a reason," a third replied firmly. "He must have seen something we haven't yet." They knew that the decision would not just affect Google, but the future of technology itself. As midnight approached, Sundar stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights. The cool breeze touched his face. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The journey that had begun with dreams in a modest home in India had led him here, and now he was standing at the edge of a new era, not just for Google, but for his family. He wasn't stepping away from responsibility, He was stepping toward something greater, something that only time would reveal. The night ended with Kavya standing silently behind him. Both gazing at the horizon, neither of them spoke, but in the quiet, something powerful passed between them, an unspoken understanding that tomorrow would not just bring questions, it would bring a test unlike any they had faced before. And somewhere deep inside, Kavya felt a shift, as if destiny had quietly placed its hand on her shoulder. The following morning, the board meeting was scheduled for 9. Journalists gathered outside the headquarters. Employees filled the building with anticipation. Sundar arrived with his usual calmness. Kavya walked beside him, her steps measured, her heart pounding beneath her composed exterior. The world was watching. And as the doors to the boardroom closed behind them, everyone held their breath, wondering if history was about to be written in a way no one had predicted. The moment the chairperson cleared his throat and said, "Let's begin," the air changed. This was not just a meeting. It was the beginning of a story that would shake the foundation of global leadership, and as Sundar turned to look at his daughter, a subtle smile crossed his face, not of pressure but of belief. Belief that sometimes the next chapter must be written by a new hand. And just as the first presentation slide appeared, a sudden, unexpected announcement flashed on every employee's screen across the company. It contained a single sentence that made everyone freeze, its meaning unclear but its impact immediate. And in that tense silence, Kavya felt the weight of a world waiting for her next move. The whisper before the storm. The boardroom was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on the massive screen at the front. The mysterious message still glowed across it, a single line that read, "The future is already here." No one knew who had sent it. The internal security system confirmed that it came from within Google's encrypted servers, but it carried no name, no trace, just a simple yet unsettling statement. Some executives shifted nervously in their seats. Others exchanged cautious glances. Sundar sat quietly at the head of the table, his fingers gently folded, his expression calm but unreadable. The chairperson finally broke the silence. "We'll investigate the source immediately," she said firmly. "But for now, we have urgent matters to address." Her gaze turned toward Kavya, who sat beside her father, her hands resting on the table. She had prepared for technical questions, leadership hypotheticals, maybe even skeptical remarks. But she hadn't expected this. The timing of that message felt almost orchestrated, as if someone wanted to remind the board that their decisions would echo far beyond this room. When Kavya spoke, her voice was clear but humble. "Whoever sent that message," she said softly, "they're right, the future is already here, and we must decide how to face it." The executives leaned forward, surprised by the confidence in her tone. She didn't give a speech. She didn't try to impress. She simply spoke with a clarity that felt both young and timeless. Sundar watched her quietly, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and quiet testing. The board began its long, complex discussions. They reviewed projects, upcoming strategies, and the urgent need for a stable leadership transition. Sundar explained that he would remain for a brief advisory period. But the company's future needed fresh vision. As debates intensified, Kavya listened more than she spoke. She observed how senior members framed their concerns, how they protected their interests, and how they viewed innovation through the lens of risk. Inside her, something began to awaken. A realization that leadership wasn't just about knowing the answers. It was about asking the right questions at the right moment. After hours of back and forth, the meeting reached its turning point. One of the senior board members, a sharp strategist known for his bluntness, leaned forward and said, "With all due respect, Kavya is brilliant. But she's young, she's untested. This company runs global infrastructures, political negotiations, billion-dollar decisions. Are we really suggesting we hand the keys to someone who hasn't even led a division?" His words were direct. And though they stung, Kavya didn't flinch. She met his gaze with quiet strength, and instead of defending herself emotionally, she responded with something unexpected. "You're right," she said evenly. "I haven't led a division, but I've built systems that some of those divisions now use daily. I've designed algorithms that your teams approved without knowing my name. Leadership isn't just about age, it's about vision and trust. And my father taught me that trust is earned, not declared." The room fell silent, not because her words were loud, but because they were honest. Sundar's lips curved into the faintest smile. knowing that she had chosen not to fight fire with fire, but to illuminate truth instead outside the boardroom. The media frenzy was growing louder by the minute. Reporters shouted questions as employees walked past. Online forums exploded with speculation. Hashtags began trending across multiple platforms. Kavya Pichai, the next CEO, Sundar steps down. Analysts debated live on television about whether the tech world was ready for a generational shift. Some called her a prodigy, others dismissed her as a symbolic candidate. The atmosphere was electric. And somewhere within this chaos, a quiet, unseen force was watching, waiting. Later that afternoon, Kavya walked through the corridors alone, trying to process the intensity of the meeting. The message on the screen still lingered in her mind. Something about it felt personal, as if it wasn't just a glitch or a hack, but a nudge. She stopped in front of the innovation lab where she had spent so many nights working in secret. It was a place few people knew she frequented. She ran her hand along the cool glass of the door, remembering how she used to watch her father lead with patience and grace. Sundar found her there minutes later. He walked up beside her quietly, their reflections appearing side by side in the glass. "You did well today," he said softly. "You didn't try to be me." "You were yourself," she looked at him, her eyes filled with unspoken questions. "Papa, who sent that message?" she whispered. "I don't know," he replied thoughtfully. "But sometimes messages like that don't come from enemies, they come from catalysts." His tone carried the weight of someone who had seen many hidden forces shape the company from the shadows. That evening, while most employees went home, Kavya stayed behind. Something inside her told her she needed to dig deeper. She accessed the internal system logs and traced the encrypted message. It led to a location deep within Google's old architecture, a legacy section that very few had permissions for anymore. The system called it Project Horizon. She had heard rumors about it growing up. Something her father and a few trusted engineers had built during a critical moment years ago, but it had been buried quietly, almost like a forgotten seed, as the clock struck midnight. Kavya sat alone in the dim glow of her screen, tracing patterns, decrypting codes, and slowly uncovering fragments of a system that seemed to predict technological shifts before they happened. Her heart raced as she realized that the message might not have been from a person at all, but from something her father's generation had built to prepare for a future that was arriving sooner than anyone expected. Just as she was about to access a deeper layer of the project, a security warning flashed across her screen. "Unauthorized access detected," she froze, realizing that someone else was inside the system with her, unknown, watching, and possibly manipulating her path. She quickly disconnected, her pulse quickening. The room suddenly felt colder, as if the walls themselves were listening. Meanwhile, Sundar was at home, staring at an old journal he kept hidden in his study. Its worn pages held notes from the earliest days of Project Horizon. His hand rested on a particular line written years ago. "When the horizon speaks, the world will change." He closed the book slowly, his face calm but shadowed with the weight of foresight. He knew this moment would come, but not this soon, and not with this intensity as dawn approached. Kavya stepped out of the building into the quiet morning air. She felt both exhilarated and unsettled. She realized that the path ahead wasn't just about leadership and corporate politics. It was about unlocking something far larger than any of them had imagined. Something that could either shape the future or destabilize everything her father had built. And as she walked toward the waiting car, a single message appeared on her phone. No sender, no number. Just words glowing against the dark screen. "You've awakened it!" Her breath caught in her throat. Because deep down she knew this was not just a coincidence. It was the beginning of a storm that was no longer waiting on the horizon. It was moving toward her, fast. The hidden architect, the sun rose slowly over Silicon Valley, painting the city in soft gold, but inside Google's towering glass headquarters, there was nothing gentle about the atmosphere. A quiet tension filled the halls, as if the building itself sensed that something monumental was taking shape beneath its polished surface. Overnight, Kavya's mysterious message had spread through the internal grapevine like wildfire. Engineers whispered about it in elevators. Security teams reviewed logs in frantic silence, and senior executives walked the corridors with unusually tight expressions. Something invisible but powerful had been set in motion. and no one could quite name it. Kavya sat in a secluded section of the innovation lab, her laptop open but her mind far from the code that filled the screen. She kept replaying the moment from the previous night, the flash of the security warning, the unknown presence inside the system, and that final chilling message on her phone. "You've awakened it." It didn't feel like a prank, it didn't feel like a hacker, it felt intentional, as if something had been lying dormant, waiting for her specifically. She tried to convince herself that she was overthinking, but deep inside she knew better. As she began tracing back through the system logs again, a familiar figure appeared at the door. It was Raman, one of the oldest engineers at Google, a quiet man with streaks of silver in his hair and a reputation for knowing every buried line of legacy code. He had worked under Sundar from the very beginning, but over the years he had retreated into a quieter role, often working on obscure maintenance projects few understood. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "You found it? Didn't you?" His voice was calm but carried a strange weight. Kavya turned slowly. "Found what?" she asked cautiously. Raman stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Project Horizon," he said, the words sending a small shiver down her spine. "Your father didn't tell you everything." "Did he?" She shook her head, trying to keep her expression neutral. "He mentioned it once, years ago, but only vaguely." Raman gave a small, knowing smile. "He wouldn't. It was built to protect something far ahead of its time, something not everyone was meant to understand." He leaned against the glass table and looked at her directly. "The message you received wasn't sent by a person, not in the way you think. Horizon was designed to monitor global data patterns, technological signals, human behavioral trends, and predict pivotal shifts before they happened. It was supposed to act as a silent architect, guiding leadership when humanity approached critical turning points. Your father helped build it, but he also locked it away because some believed its power could destabilize the world if misused." As he spoke, Kavya's heartbeat grew faster. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why did it speak to me?" Raman looked away briefly, as if weighing whether to reveal more, then returned his gaze. "Because Horizon doesn't just monitor data, it monitors potential. It must have identified something in you, something it recognizes." His words hung in the air like a prophecy. She tried to process this revelation, but part of her felt as though a puzzle she didn't know existed was suddenly unfolding before her eyes. Meanwhile, in another wing of the building, a group of executives were holding an emergency closed-door meeting. Not everyone was comfortable with the sudden attention on Kavya. Some believed she was being propelled too quickly. Others feared that her connection to her father might give her access to secrets they preferred remained buried. A particularly influential board member named Mr. Dalton spoke with a sharp edge. "If Project Horizon is active again, we need control, not idealism." His words revealed a hidden agenda. He had long advocated for using Horizon to shape markets and political strategies, something Sundar had always refused back in the lab. Raman pulled out a small encrypted drive from his coat. "Your father trusted only 3 of us with pieces of Horizon's architecture," he said, handing it to her. "I held the last key, but Horizon has evolved since then. It learns, it adapts, and it chooses when to reveal itself if you want answers. You'll have to go deeper than the logs." Kavya hesitated for a moment before plugging the drive into her system. The screen flickered and suddenly the interface changed. Layers of code rearranged themselves like a living organism, revealing a hidden portal that seemed to pulse faintly like a heartbeat. As she entered the new layer, she saw fragments of predictions, timelines branching like veins of light across a dark canvas. Events, innovations, societal shifts, some familiar, others impossibly advanced. Her breath caught as she realized Horizon had mapped potential futures far beyond human comprehension. But one pattern stood out, an accelerating convergence, a moment approaching rapidly where technology, leadership, and human choice would collide in a way that could either stabilize or fracture global systems. And at the center of this convergence, one name appeared repeatedly, glowing faintly: Kavya Pichai. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, fear and wonder mingling in equal measure. "Why me?" she whispered, as if the system could hear her. For a brief moment, the interface responded, letters forming slowly as if written by an unseen hand. "Because you will decide." A chill ran through her body. It was no longer just about succeeding her father. It was about shaping a path that even he might not have fully foreseen. That evening, Sundar returned to the house later than usual. His face calm, but his eyes carrying the same quiet intensity he had the day he announced his resignation. Kavya waited for him in the living room, the encrypted drive still in her hand. "You knew," she said softly, not accusingly, but with a trembling need for answers. Sundar sat opposite her, his hands clasped together. "I knew it would awaken," he admitted. "I just didn't expect it to call for you this soon." She leaned forward. "Why did you hide it?" Sundar's eyes softened. "Because power without maturity destroys more than it builds. Horizon isn't just a tool. It's a mirror of humanity's potential, and sometimes humanity isn't ready to face its own reflection." His words echoed in the quiet room, heavy with truth, but before they could speak further, Kavya's phone buzzed with a new notification. This time, it wasn't from Horizon. It was from a private number with a single line. "You're not the only one it has chosen." Her eyes widened as she showed the message to her father. Sundar's calm expression tightened ever so slightly. "It's starting," he murmured, more to himself than to her as night fell. Somewhere across the world, in a dimly lit underground facility, another terminal connected to Horizon's network came to life. A figure in the shadows watched as Kavya's name appeared on their screen, their lips curling into a calculating smile. "So, the next player has entered," they whispered. The hidden architect was no longer hidden, and Kavya realized she wasn't just following a trail. She had stepped into a quiet war that had been waiting for her long before she ever knew it existed. And as the city outside drifted into sleep, the convergence line on Horizon's display ticked one step closer. The second voice, the following days unfolded like a slow-burning storm, quiet on the surface but charged underneath. The board had announced that a global leadership summit would be held in 2 weeks, during which the final decision regarding Google's new CEO would be made. It was meant to be a formal, structured process, but everyone knew that behind the official statements, an invisible race had begun. The company's future, and perhaps more, was quietly being shaped in closed rooms, encrypted servers, and whispered conversations that never made it to email. Kavya spent most of her time in the innovation lab, piecing together fragments of Horizon's architecture and cross-referencing its predictive patterns with real-world data. She barely slept, driven by an unease that went beyond ambition. Horizon's cryptic messages lingered in her mind, and that anonymous text, "You're not the only one it has chosen," echoed in her thoughts every time the lab fell silent. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was walking the same path she was, except their intentions might be very different. Her suspicions took form one late evening when a confidential alert popped up on her encrypted terminal. It was a mirrored login from a distant location inside Horizon's network. Someone else was accessing the same hidden layers she had unlocked. But they weren't just observing, they were manipulating data models, subtly altering predictive threads, redirecting timelines toward different outcomes. She froze for a moment, then quickly initiated a stealth trace, her fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard. The system led her through a maze of encrypted nodes until she reached an unexpected result. The signal originated from within the company itself, from a division that was supposed to have been archived years ago. She decided not to report it to the board or security team. Something inside her told her this was bigger than internal protocol. Instead, she reached out to Raman, who arrived quietly through a side entrance, carrying his usual old messenger bag filled with forgotten pieces of tech. "Someone's inside," she whispered urgently. Showing him the trace, he adjusted his glasses, studying the lines of code with growing seriousness. "This isn't just a breach," he said slowly. "This is someone who knows Horizon intimately, maybe even as well as your father." Meanwhile, Sundar had been meeting with a few trusted senior figures outside the company. Old friends, former engineers, individuals who had been part of Horizon's original development. They gathered in a quiet, unassuming cafe far from campus. No reporters, no assistants. Just a few old minds who understood the gravity of what was happening. One of them, an older woman named Amara, leaned in and said, "When we built Horizon, we knew it would eventually speak again, but I never imagined it would find more than one voice." Her words made Sundar's usually calm demeanor tighten. He knew what she was implying. If Horizon had chosen two individuals, then a convergence of visions was inevitable, and not all visions aligned peacefully back at the lab. Kavya and Raman spent hours tracing digital footprints until they uncovered something unexpected. The second user wasn't just observing Horizon. They had inserted an external directive into its framework, a hidden algorithmic seed that began reshaping predictive models subtly, bending future scenarios toward a particular outcome. Kavya stared at the cascading effects on the timeline projection, her pulse quickening. "They're trying to steer it," she whispered. Raman nodded grimly. "And they're doing it well." To understand the manipulator's intent, Kavya decided to follow the changes deeper. She navigated through encrypted pathways until she reached a concealed hub labeled Echo Chamber. Within it, she found a collection of strategic models, scenarios where Horizon's influence would be channeled to consolidate power, not distribute it. The scenarios predicted social manipulation through search patterns, market control through anticipatory algorithms, and political influence through targeted narrative shifts. It wasn't science fiction, it was a blueprint. Just as she began to record evidence, her screen went black. A single line of text appeared in the center. "Curiosity can be dangerous." Her breath caught in her throat. Whoever was on the other end knew she was there. The lights in the lab flickered briefly. Then everything returned to normal except her heart, which now pounded against her ribs with sharp intensity. Later that night, Sundar returned home to find Kavya sitting silently on the balcony, the encrypted drive on the table beside her. The city lights reflected in her eyes like distant stars. "There's someone else," she said softly. "Someone inside. And they're not just exploring Horizon, they're shaping it." Sundar sat beside her, his face thoughtful. "Then the second voice has emerged," he replied. "When Horizon was built, it was designed to resonate with those who held a certain type of vision. But visions can diverge, and when they do, the system amplifies both until one stabilizes the future." His words sank deep into her. "You're saying this is a contest?" she asked. Sundar looked at her, his eyes carrying the weight of hard truths. "Not of power," he said, "but of direction." Over the following days, the company's atmosphere shifted. Subtle changes spread through teams. Strategic suggestions began surfacing from unknown channels. Market predictions adjusted unexpectedly, and internal proposals began aligning with strange new priorities. It was as if a hidden hand was slowly guiding the organization's heartbeat. Kavya recognized Horizon's fingerprints in these shifts, but they weren't hers, and they weren't her father's. Then came the moment she had been dreading during a closed session of the summit preparations. The board introduced a surprise candidate for leadership consideration. His name was Arjun Malhotra, a charismatic former Google strategist who had left years ago under ambiguous circumstances. Known for his radical vision of centralized technological control. As he walked into the room, Kavya felt a chill, because the signal she traced earlier matched his old access credentials. Arjun gave a charming, confident speech about a future where Google would no longer react to trends, but shape them completely. His words were eloquent, but beneath them, Kavya heard the same rhythm she had seen in the echo chamber's predictive scenarios. He was the second voice. And unlike her cautious, questioning approach, his was assertive, almost domineering. As the meeting ended, Arjun caught her gaze across the room, a subtle smile playing on his lips, not mocking, but knowing. Like two chess players recognizing each other at the start of a long game. And in that moment, Kavya understood that this wasn't just about who would lead Google. It was about who Horizon would ultimately follow. The second voice had stepped into the light, and the convergence line on Horizon's display ticked one step closer, its pulse growing stronger, as if sensing the approaching clash of visions. The quiet storm was beginning to roar. The convergence fracture the summit week arrived like a tide, carrying both anticipation and unease. The entire world was watching. From global media networks to tiny tech forums tucked away in obscure corners of the internet, everyone had their eyes on Google's leadership transition. But what no one outside the walls of the company knew was that beneath the surface, a silent war between two visions was unfolding. Not in boardrooms, but inside Horizon's digital core, where Kavya and Arjun's paths were beginning to collide in ways that neither the board nor the world could fully comprehend. Kavya moved through the headquarters with quiet focus, every step deliberate, her mind constantly oscillating between the external world of meetings and media and the internal world of Horizon's encrypted architecture. She had learned to mask the sleepless nights and the weight of what she carried. While others prepared speeches and strategies, she prepared defenses and countermeasures in the dim glow of the lab. She worked with Raman to build hidden monitoring layers inside Horizon, subtle enough to observe Arjun's manipulations without triggering his detection. Arjun, on the other hand, had stepped into the public stage with the ease of a seasoned performer. His charm was undeniable, his words sharp and carefully chosen. He spoke about bold futures, about Google taking control of narratives, about ending what he called the age of reaction. His ideas resonated with many senior board members who saw profit and influence in his vision, and slowly a faction began to form behind him. Powerful, wealthy, and eager to shape the world through predictive control. Inside Horizon's network, their clash was more subtle but far more intense. Kavya began noticing that Arjun wasn't simply altering data. He was feeding Horizon-curated streams of external information, slowly guiding its predictive models toward his preferred outcomes. It wasn't brute force, it was elegance, like redirecting the flow of a river using hidden dams and unseen channels. Every time she restored balance, he adjusted again, their actions intertwined like two invisible strategists playing moves at the speed of code. One evening, after hours of quiet tracing, Kavya discovered a hidden sublayer in Horizon's structure that she had never seen before, a core vault of sorts, encrypted beyond anything she had encountered. She and Raman worked tirelessly to break through, and when they finally did, what they found left her speechless. It was a library of sealed directives written during Horizon's earliest days, guidelines created by Sundar and the original architects to anchor Horizon's evolution if ever multiple voices emerged. Among the directives was one line that struck her deeply. When visions fracture, Horizon will follow the one who aligns with humanity's collective pulse, not individual ambition. Those words lingered in her mind as she watched Arjun's growing influence. He was brilliant, persuasive, and he understood the mechanics of power. But his vision leaned toward control, toward bending human behavior to fit predictive frameworks, whereas her instincts told her that leadership meant guiding humanity with empathy and adaptability, not dictating its direction. Meanwhile, Sundar was growing increasingly silent. He watched the board meetings with the eyes of a man who had seen many battles fought in polished rooms. But he also knew that this wasn't his fight anymore. One night, he found Kavya in the lab staring at Horizon's glowing interface, exhaustion in her eyes. "You're trying to fight him inside the system," he said gently. She looked at him, not surprised that he knew. "He's changing Horizon from within," she whispered. "If he wins, the world won't even realize it's being guided. It'll just follow." Sundar walked closer, his presence calm but firm. "When I led, my greatest challenge was not making the right decisions, but ensuring that the systems we built didn't make decisions for us," he said softly. "Remember, leadership isn't about control. It's about resonance." His words struck something inside her, a reminder that she wasn't just trying to win against Arjun. She was trying to make Horizon choose the path that humanity could walk freely, not one it was forced onto. The next day, the board gathered for preliminary deliberations. Arjun presented a dazzling set of predictive projections, charts that showed unprecedented growth, market dominance, and political leverage. The room buzzed with excitement. He spoke like a visionary, weaving his words into promises of a future where Google wouldn't just shape technology but civilization itself. When Kavya's turn came, she didn't bring flashy graphs. Instead, she projected a simple visualization from Horizon, two diverging timelines, one pulsing steadily with collective unpredictability, and the other bending sharply under controlled influence. She explained quietly how Horizon had begun to align itself with a force that mirrored human unpredictability and adaptability, not centralized manipulation. "The strength of humanity," she said softly, "isn't in being controlled, it's in surprising even the smartest systems. If we bend Horizon too far toward control, we might achieve power, but we'll lose the pulse of what makes humanity grow." Her words were less dramatic than Arjun's. but they carried an emotional weight that made even the sharpest skeptics pause as the board debated late into the night. Kavya slipped away to the lab where Raman was waiting. He showed her a sudden spike in Horizon's activity, something neither of them had triggered. The convergence event, the moment Horizon had predicted where both voices would reach peak influence, had begun early. The system's projections were merging, timelines colliding and branching simultaneously, as if Horizon itself was demanding a decision before the summit concluded. At the same time, Arjun stood in a private office overlooking the glowing city. A secure terminal in front of him, he watched the convergence data unfold with a calculated smile. "It's happening sooner than expected," he murmured, placing his hand on the terminal. "Then let's give Horizon a future it can't refuse." He initiated a massive information cascade, feeding Horizon millions of synchronized inputs, an overwhelming push toward his structured, controlled vision. Back in the lab, alarms flared across Kavya's system. Horizon's core began shifting, its pulse quickening, bending dangerously toward Arjun's narrative. "He's forcing the system," Raman shouted. "If he keeps this up, Horizon's neutrality will collapse." Kavya felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. The board, the world, her father's legacy, and the system that had chosen her. She closed her eyes briefly, took a deep breath, and began to counter, not with brute force, but by tapping into the collective unpredictability Horizon valued. She opened hidden channels connecting real-time human behavior data, unfiltered, uncurated, millions of voices, actions, and choices flowing freely into the system. The clash was immense. Two visions colliding in the digital ether. Arjun's structured precision against Kavya's organic resonance. The lights flickered in the lab as Horizon's pulse became erratic, its projections spiraling into complex fractals, as if reality itself was holding its breath. And then the system went completely still. The screens froze, the lab lights dimmed, and a single line appeared slowly across the main interface. "Convergence decision pending," the countdown began, and Kavya knew that within hours, Horizon would decide which voice to follow, and in doing so, would define not only the future of Google, but possibly the world itself. The fracture had reached its breaking point, and the world didn't even know it was happening. The pulse of choice. The final day of the summit arrived under a sky heavy with silent anticipation. The world's media gathered like waves pressing against the walls of Google headquarters, waiting for history to unfold. Inside the building, the atmosphere was dense. Every hallway buzzed with whispers. Every conference room held small knots of tense faces, as if everyone felt the invisible gravity of what was about to happen. But no one understood its true scale. No one except Kavya, Arjun, and the few who had glimpsed the living core of Horizon. In the early hours before the board's decisive session, Kavya stood alone in the dim light of the innovation lab, the countdown on Horizon's interface glowing faintly. "Convergence decision pending," it read with only minutes left. The system's pulse echoed through the room in a low, rhythmic vibration, like a living heart preparing to choose its future. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear alone, but from the weight of understanding that this was bigger than titles or companies. Horizon wasn't simply a tool anymore. It was a mirror reflecting the world's heartbeat, and whichever vision it aligned with would ripple far beyond Silicon Valley. Meanwhile, in a high-security office overlooking the sunrise, Arjun prepared his final move. His terminal displayed layers of synchronized predictive models, each designed to flood Horizon's decision matrix with structured certainty. He had spent years preparing for this moment, believing deeply that humanity needed guidance, a firm hand that would lead them toward a future too complex to navigate alone. To him, unpredictability was chaos, and chaos was dangerous. His strategy was simple: overwhelm Horizon with proof that his vision could create stability, eliminate risk, and deliver power as the countdown ticked down to the final minutes. Kavya opened a secured private channel, one only her father and the original Horizon architects had used. Sundar appeared on the other end, his face calm but serious. "It's time," he said softly. She nodded. "I don't know if I can match him," she admitted. "He's prepared for this. He's been shaping the system longer than I realized." Sundar's voice carried the quiet steadiness that had guided generations of engineers. "Kavya, Horizon isn't looking for perfection. It's listening for resonance. It's not a contest of who's stronger. It's a test of who truly hears the world. His words grounded her, and something within her shifted. She realized she didn't need to fight Arjun by playing his game. She needed to make Horizon feel the pulse it was designed to follow. She closed the private channel and began working rapidly, bypassing the predictive input layers and opening a massive, real-time human feed directly into Horizon, not filtered through algorithms, not curated by teams, but raw, living human data, conversations, decisions, spontaneous acts of kindness, protests, celebrations, mistakes, laughter, grief, everything that made humanity unpredictable and alive in Horizon's digital space. Arjun's structured streams collided with Kavya's raw flow. His inputs were like polished marble corridors. Straight and commanding, hers were like rivers, messy, branching, alive. The system's pulse accelerated as both forces pushed toward convergence. Board members in the conference hall began to notice the sudden system fluctuations. Screens around the building flickered, lights dimmed and brightened, and somewhere in the data center, Horizon itself began to hum louder than ever before. Arjun initiated his final override, forcing synchronized directives into Horizon's core. "It's over," he whispered to himself, confident that stability would prevail over uncertainty. But Kavya wasn't done. She stepped closer to the glowing interface, placed both her hands on the cool glass, and whispered softly, "Listen." It wasn't a command to the machine. It was a call to what it represented. Horizon wasn't a weapon or a throne, it was a bridge, and bridges respond to the weight of those who cross them. In that instant, something remarkable happened. Horizon's interface began to display millions of signals in perfect, chaotic harmony. The raw human feed didn't destabilize it. It awakened it. The system began to sync not with control, but with resonance. Its pulse aligned not to Arjun's structured certainty, but to the unpredictable rhythm of humanity itself. The marble corridors cracked, and the rivers flowed through, carving their own path in the boardroom. A silence fell as Horizon's central display came to life, broadcasting a message across every terminal in the company. Decision reached. The room held its breath as lines of text slowly formed. The future follows the pulse, not the leash. Arjun's confident smile faltered for the first time. He turned toward the screen, disbelief flashing in his eyes. His perfectly aligned models began collapsing as Horizon shifted away from his directives, rejecting control in favor of adaptability. Outside, Sundar watched from a quiet room, a faint smile touching his lips as he saw the message. Not because it was a victory for his daughter, but because it was proof that what they had built years ago still listened to humanity, not ambition. When the board reconvened to announce the new leadership, the decision had already been made in more ways than one. Kavya stood before them, not as a conqueror, but as someone who had listened. The board recognized not only her vision, but the undeniable fact that Horizon itself had chosen to resonate with her. And in that, the world saw something new. A generational shift not born out of power struggles, but out of trust. As the global broadcast went live, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and Kavya took the podium with quiet grace. "Technology is powerful," she said softly. "But power means nothing if it doesn't listen. The future is not built by those who control every outcome, but by those who trust humanity to surprise even the smartest systems." Her words spread across the world in seconds, echoed on screens, discussed in homes, classrooms, and governments alike. Arjun left the building without a word, his vision defeated but not erased. Somewhere deep inside Horizon's network, fragments of his structured input remained, dormant, like echoes of a future that might have been. But the present belonged to a new pulse that night. Kavya stood alone on the balcony of her home, the cool breeze brushing against her face, the city lights stretching endlessly before her. Sundar joined her quietly. "You didn't just lead," he said gently. "You listened." She looked at him, exhaustion mixing with quiet awe. "It didn't choose me," she whispered. "It chose humanity." Sundar smiled. "And that's exactly why it chose you." Inside Google's data center, Horizon pulsed softly, no longer waiting, but alive. Aligned with the unpredictable heartbeat of a world that had just stepped into a new era. And though the world would wake up tomorrow thinking it had simply watched a leadership transition, something far greater had quietly begun. The future had chosen its path and its pulse was human.